Welcome to Best Boys, a film podcast, an amateur film study podcast for the average Joe, the buffest buffs, and the cringiest bingers. I'm your host, JP, and I'm joined by my brother, professional Hollywood videographer,
Corey with a story, and I cast you out from this week's podcast to enjoy something a little more heavenly, like The Exorcist.
Heavenly. Cleanliness is next to heavenliness. So that's not what the saying is.
Next to godliness.
Yeah, godliness. Well, we're getting down and dirty with the classic, with the scariest movie of all time. Do you think that? Do you think that The Exorcist is the scariest movie of all time? When we were children, that is what everybody said.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that, but my age, I remember in elementary school, like 5th grade, kids telling me, that shouldn't have been, they were way too young to have been seeing this movie. And just the wild stuff in my imagination would just be going crazy about what could possibly be in this movie. And honestly, when you see it, it does, live up to the hype. But they didn't make just one. They made 3. This is a trilogy that spans over the decades, kind of in the heart of the sequel culture that we live today. I mean, I guess there's even 2. There's like a prequel, and they made stuff in the 2000s, but those are real bad. But I feel like the first 3 are kind of a thing. So I feel like I suggested this. We wanted something for Halloween. Wanted to do the spoopy episode. And I think I must have subconsciously been influenced because Red Letter Media last year, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, made a video about, did a review of Exorcist 1 and Exorcist 3. Because Exorcist 3 is underrated and Exorcist 1, it's great. It's a classic, whatever. So I do have to preface that I didn't realize it till after we had assigned these movies that had just been done. Not just been done, but I had been obviously inspired by it. So I may, bring up points from that video. For those that are listening, you may want to just check it out for yourself. But I figure, listen to us first, or you can listen to that, but make sure you come back and we can talk about it, whatnot. But Corey, I'm here to get your, how many times have you seen The Exorcist before?
This was probably, I would say, the 3rd of my life, maybe 4th. I remember, so it was one of those things where it was growing up, Dad had always instilled into me of the 3 scariest movies I wasn't supposed to watch, but we did anyways, was The Exorcist, the first Nightmare on Elm Street, specifically just the first one, and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre as being the scariest shit you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I remember that the first Nightmare on Elm Street lived up to that. It gave me legitimate nightmares. The first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though, I think I was desensitized enough for the time I saw it, because at that point, Jared and I were going to Hollywood Video every week and renting classic horror movies.
Yeah.
And so that one wasn't as nearly scary, but this one was a movie that I only saw in parts because I couldn't handle it as a kid, and then finally saw it in its entirety growing up at some point, in high school or college. But it still holds up. A lot of the effects and everything, it still holds up real well. And all 3 of these movies, even the shitty second one, I will say, the way that some of the stuff is portrayed and is shot, I feel works the best only because it is shot on these old cameras in back in the 70s, or in the way that it looks and feels has this thing where it's I feel if you did it with modern cameras and the same thing, it would just feel nowhere near as creepy and realistic, if that makes sense. But there's something about it. It's you're watching old home movies or something.
There's a texture. There's it feels
it works way more because of it. It works more today because it was made back then than something like this, I feel done today.
Well, and it being not lower quality, but like on older cameras and having that look, that aesthetic. It's softer, and might be more forgiving to some of the effects, or it adds like a lo-fi ness to it, that kind of gives it adds to its own creepiness and aesthetic and whatnot. Um, yeah, I kind of agree that all three of these movies have a vibe that is very creepy innately. It kind of is about like the essence of evil and good versus evil and the darkness. It's kind of and like it's this mixture of the scientific and that there's still like even though science knows all this stuff and has all these answers, it doesn't know everything. Like there's still things that we can only explain with the spiritual, that we need an expert in the spiritual to kind of to deal with these problems. That's a big part of the first movie. Is like I think like I feel like the I don't know if it's the second or the first act that is pretty much all just doctors and science, like clinical things and tests and procedures. Um, and they're kind of ruling things out and moving up this ladder, and it gets more and more over the top kind of as it goes until the point that she's being hypnotized. And I guess for the 70s, like it was radical, but it was kind of interesting and like sexy, whereas now we know that like hypnotism is kind of bunk pretty much. But it adds like they're getting desperate. They'll try anything, they'll see, and they get to the point where then they're gonna see a priest because they don't know what else it could be. I really think that descent into like I'm a rational non-religious person, and I am trying to just figure out what's wrong with my child and help my child, and then it just descends into like I don't know what else to do and turning to the supernatural.
Yeah, I like that even the church, they're all like, exorcism. We got rid of that forever ago because we discovered things like schizophrenia and all that. And even the church has its own like psychiatrist, in Father Karras,
Mm.
that is like they're trying to modernize them. I think they even reference it. It's either in this movie or the third movie they reference modernizing the church, um, to take in account of like science and modern medicine and stuff, to help kind of find that line between where religion starts and that ends and
Mm-hmm.
science begins.
Mm-hmm.
But it does it very well because the whole time it takes itself very much serious and everyone else is like even when they recommend like the doctors are the ones that recommend the exorcism, and even when they do, it's out of pure schizophrenia of like, well, if she believes that she is, there are cases where if they get exorcised, then they believe because they believe so much that they were possessed that it works, but not necessarily that they were actually possessed. So it keeps giving you that like skepticism the whole way through, pretty much. I would say until the girl is full on like in green demon makeup, like it does a really good job of like keeping that theme of just like it's uh, faith is just like on the fringe the whole time, but then it ends up being like the savior.
Yeah, it and like it adds to the realism of it. It kind of and like the way that it's shot and it's very like clinical, and the way that it's shot very like almost like a documentary or something like that. It's not a mockumentary, but it feels real. It's trying to be, even though it's a very the premise at its core is fantasy, but it's trying to treat it as if it was reality and how everything else would react to that thing in a real world situation. And I think that's what makes it so immersive, and that's what makes it so scary, is that it feels real. It feels like it could, like you make it feel like it could possibly happen or something like that.
It's wild to me though. All the in the intro, I always as a kid would end up missing the beginning of it, and it would always start in DC. But
Mm-hmm.
rewatching it, I always forget that that have that whole Iraq scene, which the whole time I was like, "Is this Egypt or something?" Because they're it's an excavation site. for like paleontology or not paleontology, archaeologists and stuff. But it is Iraq, and I'm guessing what it ends up being like when he finds the little demon statue thing. Is that what like activates in the girl, or it just happened to be that like
It's just that he has been hunting. He's connected to like studying the demon. But we know which we then later find out is Pazuzu. Pazuzu.
Is that canon?
Yes, it is not said in this movie or the third movie, but Pazuzu is the name of the demon. It is
Why
not.
would the third movie makes the second movie not canon, yet they still cling to the name Pazuzu.
Well, because even in the first movie, that statue, that like it has like a monster with like wings and a snake penis, like that is Pazuzu. That is a real Pazuzu is a real demon or like a mythological thing. I play that game Shin Megami Tensei, and it's like Pokemon, but instead of catching monsters, you catch demons and like mythological things, religious things. And Pazuzu is a demon that I have in my party right now. Believe it or not.
Pazuzu. Does he have the snake penis still?
I don't know. He's a lion's head and he's got wings. I wouldn't be surprised because there's a lot of penises in SMT. But yeah, Pazuzu.
But yeah, okay, so that cleared that up then, because that was like I always figured that the two were connected of Father Marin in the beginning, and then the girl getting possessed. But it seems, but maybe they're just it's like connected, but not directly.
Because it says that there was like the lines about they called in Father Marin because he's dealt with possessions before, and that one the last one, I forget if he said it was in Africa or something, but it lasted over a month, and it almost killed him. And then it's implied later that the demon knows Father Marin, and that it's the same demon that he previously exorcised.
And I thought we got that info in the second movie, but I guess it is canon. If it's all canon,
I know it's in the first movie too,
because they had
the conversation about him. They had the conversation about him exorcising the demon before, and it lasted a month, and it almost killed him.
Gotcha. I don't know why I thought that was what the priest told the father in the second movie when he was like.
No, that's when Father Karras. Father Karras has that conversation. It's all it bleeds together, and I think that's why. Like the first, we'll get to the second. The second movie is like the one that's really interesting to talk about. The third movie is too. The first one, I feel like everyone's seen it. We all know what happens. And it's just like, being blown away, and that it still holds up on this amazing level. It's directed by William Friedkin, by the way, who I think is most well known for directing The French Connection with Gene Hackman, which is on my list that I really want to see. But I mentioned how it's shot like almost a documentary, and it's very clinical. And I think that's what makes it so real, and the kind of escalation. I think that's what makes it, it has the best feel and look of all of them. I don't know. I found out that William Friedkin was like kind of one of those crazy 70s directors that's like abusive to the actors and would like fire a gun on set or like slap somebody in the face to like get, and like they were like launching Ellen Burstyn all around the room with cables, and she'd like hit her head off shit. So yeah, I mean, but it did add an effect of realism in here. And I guess while we're on the subject, we can talk about the cast here. Ellen Burstyn is our lead, I would say. I mean, I guess it's either Father Karras or Ellen Burstyn, but I'll probably say Ellen Burstyn. And do you know what Ellen Burstyn is from? That we've watched?
No, but she looked very familiar.
She's already been on Best Boys before. On an early episode.
Oh.
Yeah, any guesses? I don't want to, leave dead air,
Uh,
but
I mean, I don't know. She looked very familiar, but I can't put my name on it.
so she plays Jared Leto's mother in Requiem for
Oh,
a Dream.
wow,
She's
that's
older.
crazy.
It's in the early 2000s.
Wow.
That's 30 years later.
Oh my god. Yeah, she ends up looking so different with the crazy hair and everything by the end of that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's the ironic that she's like it gets all these tests and goes crazy in that movie. I've seen a picture where it was like her like side by side with like the picture of Reagan and the strapped in like the one of the tests, and then a picture of her in Requiem for a Dream like strapped down getting shock treatment.
Yeah, just
Um,
circle.
but But yeah, Ellen Burstyn, who is awesome. I feel like the mom has one of the best performances of the film. And then, so we have Max von Sydow, which, everybody knows Max von Sydow. He's incredibly prolific. He's been in a million trillion things. I've been into Game of Thrones stuff lately because of House of the Dragon is currently on. I think the season finale just uh, came on. I haven't seen it yet. But he plays Blood Raven on the original Game of Thrones, and he's like a million years old. He just passed. I think he passed.
He's still alive?
No, he passed away like right after Game of Thrones ended, I think.
Oh my god.
But yeah, he was ancient on that. He was in The Force Awakens in a small role. He was in Flash Gordon. I think he's most well known for in that movie where like the knight plays chess against death. I think it's Ingmar. What the fuck is his name? Ingmar Bergman movie.
Okay.
I forgot.
I know roughly what you're talking about.
Yeah, Max von Sydow is young, very young. It's a black and white movie, and he plays that.
Seventh Seal.
Seventh Seal. That's it. You got it. So like that's where he broke out with Seventh Seal. But he's been in a million trillion things since. Judge Dredd is probably one that you know that he's like one of the judges. He's the judge that gets sent out into like the wastes or whatever because he's like too old. They retire him.
Jeez, this is then the Stallone one.
Yes, the Stallone one.
This man, this is the guy's voice or name you hear always, and then I never really like remembered what faces.
This is definitely what he's I've probably most well known for. So I always thought that he was just this old. When I watched this movie as a kid, I thought that he was like, he's just an old man and he's always looked old and he's just like an eternal liver. He just lives forever. And so I found out that he was actually just in his early 40s and they put lots and lots of makeup. It's all makeup and whatnot to make him look old.
Oh man, that makes so much more sense because in the sequel, the Exorcist 2, the Heretic, when they show young Max von Sydow shots, I kept saying, "Man, they got a great actor who looks just like him to play the younger guy."
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, he's in it.
Wow, good props on the makeup team. I never would have known. Made that boy look ancient. Like
yeah. And then Jason, go ahead.
I was gonna say when he's taking the heart medicine too, and his hands are shaking. I was like, "Oh man, that all looks super real." Like he looks like
he plays a good old man.
Wow.
So Jason Miller plays Father Karras, and Jason Miller isn't in a ton of stuff. But apparently he's a big stage actor and playwright. And he has probably the other main role, I would say. And it's very good. I think I really liked his performance, and I feel like I would have liked to see him in more things. It was kind of weird that he comes back. They don't talk about him at all in Exorcist 2, but he comes back in Exorcist 3, and it's really kind of convoluted and weird, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. That movie's wild.
But all right, so is there anything that you want to touch on specifically with the first Exorcist?
I was going to say sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to mention Linda Blair plays Reagan in the first two films, and gets considered a legendary performance from a child. actor. I think she does like all of the all of the acting, like when she's in the full makeup and everything.
Yeah. I read a thing that was saying that in the second movie, the only way she would sign on is if they agreed to never put makeup on her.
Yes, so all of the in the second one she is not like like the dressed up demon. So that's why in the end I think they had to do the split personality thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we touched on the the medical side, the science side, and reconciling that, and like yeah, like you said, and Father Karras is very like the science minded. He's a psychiatrist. He works at a university. Like it's not it's not really like that, and he really wants to look at it for all other explanations other than this little girl's possessed. um and then that's when they bring in Max von Sydow. Max von Sydow is like, nah. When as soon as he shows up, the demon like calls out for him, Father Marin.
Yeah.
And
that's so funny. Like as soon as he walks through the door, it's just like no shit is taken. There's no double thought to it or anything. It's immediately he walks in, talks to Father Karras, and Karras is like, "Are you sure you don't? Do you want to know anything about the situation?" He's like, "No. Where is she?" And he's like, "You sure you don't want to know anything?" It's like, "Bring me the girl." It's like no fucks to give. He's just a man of God
I'm here
getting
to
his
battle.
yeah, I'm here to do battle and nothing else, my brother in Christ. Now get out of my way.
Yeah, they're a good duo, and like as they're doing, like once you get to the climax, I honestly thought that the bedroom scene with the both of them was a larger part of the movie, but it's really just kind of the climax of the film. It's very tense and whatnot. It's when everything kind of comes together. Um, but yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's just so good. The back and forth, and like Father Karras kind of has these moments of weakness because his mother died, and he feels guilt for the way that she died. That that he's responsible, and the demon keeps like trying to play at that. And Father Marin's like, no, you gotta concentrate. And then ultimately it's Father Marin who succumbs to death as because he has a heart condition. And then it's up to Father Karras to kind of find a way to stop it. The there's a oh yeah there this reminds me that there's the detective character that kind of it's kind of a minor character in the movie. I guess that there's scenes cut that he is kind of a bigger role. And he comes back for the third movie. He's played by a different actor, and he's like the main guy of the third movie. So it is interesting when you think of. Did you notice right away that that's the same character, and when you from the third one to the first one?
The once the Father Dyer, I think is his name. In the third one, once they started talking to each other and referencing Father Karras, and I kind of put two and two together, even though it's obviously a different actor.
Yeah, Father Dyer is also in the first movie, but he looks completely different.
Yeah, I have things to say about the guy who replaced the detective, like the actor. I know he's like a big name.
Well, so yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Oh
man,
boy,
what a performance! What a performance!
Oh yeah, wait, hold your tongue, hold your tongue, hold your tongue. So is there anything else we want to talk about with The Exorcist other than it's a fucking perfect ass classic, and what else can you really say that hasn't already been said?
I was gonna touch on the effects. The special effects are great in this. There's not a lot of like the next two movies are super. They have super like heady, like kind of dreamy moment, like montage sequences. That this one doesn't really have. But it leads all of its effects like in camera, and it's really cool. How they at the time how they were doing everything with the 180 neck twist and the vomit and the and everything. And it's just like it still feels creepy, even though it's like it's at a time where everything was lit so you could see everything regardless of time of day. It's still like it's crazy creepy, and it works very well. Um I don't. But the crazy thing, this is what I wanted to say though. On top of this, the crazy thing to me was that I forgot this movie was made in a time, the early '70s, where like being extremely like raunchy in things was like the normal. It was before how like movies kind of cleaned themselves up. Like they ended up doing towards the latter half of the '70s and '80s, where people started um being more self-censoring in their stuff. So like the scene when the girl is just stabbing her genitals with the cross,
Oh, that was yeah, but that was
just
incredibly shocking for the time. Like
oh,
to
I
the
know,
public,
I know.
to the public at least. They probably
Yeah, but
they're cleaned up because of things like this.
exactly.
Like
That's
this
what I
is
mean.
like this is a whole nother level. Like yeah, this is shocking. That is shocking for today. That is the most shocking part. Period of the whole movie.
Because this is the same era of like John Waters and stuff, right? Like where it's just all that shock, crazy.
Yeah, but he's in the underground. He's in the underground.
But like the '70s as a whole is like has a lot more of like I'm trying to for filmmaking. I'm trying to think how to say it, where it's like not grimy or grungier, but just there's more crazy things. Whether that be like sexual or violent, whatever. It was like really going for broke before being scaled back more in the '80s when it came to like wild shit like that.
Yeah, but this something like this had never been done with this big of a movie. Like Pink Flamingos was not a big movie at the time. You know, it's like that wasn't like the mainstream, but it's like this was like a whole nother level. Like the impact that it had. Like people were like fainting in the movie theaters and stuff like that. Like this is one of the early movies that did that.
It's crazy. That whole sequence though, with that and like she shoves her mom's face into her crotch when it's all bloodied after that, and just telling everyone to fuck her and lick her and stuff is like every time I heard it, it was still like it was strong the first time I heard it when I was younger, and it's still just as strong now of just kind of like how like ooh watching that sequence.
Yes, it's incredibly rough. Incredibly rough. I really, yeah, I don't. It just holds up. I don't know if it is like the scary. I don't think it like is the scariest movie of all time. You know, I think there are movies that I think are. I don't know. Like, what would you say is your scariest movie ever?
I mean, the first Blair Witch is still up there.
I was gonna say that. I was gonna say that.
Phenomenal.
I was going to say that. I mean, like maybe it's just the time that we grew up. Like we were at like the right age that like that was the scariest fucking thing ever, and it seems so real. Like we have a bias growing up at that like that perfect time, but I don't know what else what I would pick.
I thought that movie was real up until like late middle school. Like I feel like it stuck with me so long. I thought it was real.
It's like not even that gory or crazy or anything. It's just the the vibe, the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's all in your imagination. Like I remember being in this sounds wild. Being in Sunday school, talking to one of the other kids. It was a girl in my Sunday school class, and someone had brought up the Blair Witch. And this girl said that she saw it, and then she was just telling me all this shit that like happened off camera that you can't see, and I'm like, how do you know this? Am I missing something? I remember like do I need to rewatch this? But I'm too scared to rewatch it.
Yeah.
All this because there's so much of a lore and word of mouth, like he said she said about it, that just kept it feeling like an urban legend.
Yeah, I find like the most like the scariest movies like make me feel like unnerved, and like slasher movies don't really do that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is fucking creepy, but I think that's kind of up there. The Exorcist might be up there in that mix, but I think I'm also and like more modern things I can think of, like Climax is really scary, I would say, but not in like the traditional way. So it feels strange to say that, you know?
Yeah, it was very like thriller suspenseful.
Well, and like made me feel more dread. I felt more bad feelings from that movie than you know, like one of these, or like Or
Yeah.
like Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is creepier to me than like most horror movies. But I would say, excuse me, Exorcist is definitely right in that mix. The first Alien is really good, but honestly, The Thing. What about The Thing?
I haven't seen the 70s one probably since I was a kid.
Oh yeah, me and Riss watched it. I would probably say maybe The Thing is up there. It's so fucking creepy, but it's also really cool. Dawn of the Dead, not like Dawn of the Dead is good. The Night of the Living Dead. All right, I just wanted to remember what I needed to. Sorry for the viewers. I just need to have a taste of what I consider like the benchmark of the scariest shit. Like what makes me feel scared. Like what did I have to think about? And like yeah, I do think Blair Witch is like the first thing that comes to mind because that movie, nothing filled my heart with fear. I had nightmares for so fucking long about that movie. I remember we watched the second movie and it even scared me because it just like rewoke everything from the first movie. You know, it's like, significantly, it's not the same at all. It's like about a completely different thing.
Yeah. The last thing I was gonna say to this was, and only because it became like a really big global phenomenon at the time, and I got sucked into it, was the very first Paranormal Activity. That came out at a time also where I was like perfect age to be scared by it. It was nuts to me, and it was all just imagination because it's just waiting for something to happen. It's all suspense.
Yeah, I never got in. I never got into those, but I should probably give one of those a try.
The very first one is the best. It's the first two are the best, but the very first one is really good. You just gotta like, but the second one is also really good. Anyways,
yeah. So, I mean, all this is to say, I think that The Exorcist is still is one of the scariest movies of all time. And is, you know, still like heart-wrenching, still fills you with that dread. And it still has you thinking about those kinds of things. You know, like existential things and heaven and hell and then just like the fear of you know the medical side and the science side and the unknown of like trying to figure out a medical problem. I think is such a big part of the first movie that is not really a thing as much it's a thing in the second movie, but it's not really a well explored theme, whereas this is like at the forefront. But I don't know, I don't really have anything else to say other than that. It hits just as hard as ever.
I went to when I was in DC for work probably about a month ago. We stopped at the steps, the infamous staircase, and took pictures, and it's cool. And like the house is right there next to it. It's probably a good like 15 yards like next to the stairs at the top, and it's steep. And it is just as creepy in real life.
Yeah, that's probably why he wrote the story about around the stairs or filmed it around the stairs, because they experienced those stairs and was like, these are dangerous as fuck.
Honestly, after I hadn't seen the movie in a while, whenever I saw those stairs, and then I texted the guys I went with, and it was like, "Hey, just rewatched The Exorcist. They should have renamed the movie to the staircase, because the fucking stairs are a main character in the movie. They cut to those stairs so many times throughout this movie.
Multiple characters die on the stairs.
Yeah, the stairs the real killer. I think it's the sequels should have been focusing more on the stair element.
That's what the detective was very focused on, the stairs.
They were a big deal, and little did they know the stairs were the demonic one.
All right, so what are before we move on, what are you giving the first Exorcist?
A 4.5.
So near perfect. So when I looked at Letterboxd, I had a 4.5, but you know when I decided, I'm giving it a 5.
Wow.
I think it is a benchmark. I think it is a all-time benchmark in horror. A masterclass in horror. Yeah, I don't know if I can say that about Exorcist 2, but yeah, I don't really, there's not really much else you can say. I've watched a lot of movies in the last few years, and I think it's horror-wise, it's one of the best.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's I'm trying to think of what the only thing that doesn't make it like full on fiver for me is it's I feel like it's just missing one last thing that really like fully suck me and pull me into it. But honestly, I mean
I like that.
it's a 5. Like the
Yeah,
movie's
I
definitely a
was on the
5.
edge of my seat.
Like
I couldn't do anything other than watch. But yeah, I would say like there's maybe some like there's a little bit of corny humor with with Klaus the butler, or like the Swiss butler, and like
oh, they keep calling him a Nazi at the
yeah, and
party.
they had like dinner party that was like a little bit like cheesy drunk and stuff, but it wasn't that bad really. It really wasn't that bad. And like obviously that's the thing with horror movies of the 70s and before, is the bright red blood. Is they're not like allowed to use lifelike looking blood. They're for some reason they have to use that bright red blood, and it's very much is one of the few special effects things that doesn't look good.
Whenever the party scene was going on where the girl comes down and pisses herself on the carpet, do you that whole scene, regardless of what song they were playing on the piano, all I heard was "Shake Your Ass" from Scary Movie 2 playing the entire time.
Do, 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 do. Yeah, that's true. It's very similar.
Watch yourself.
Yeah, that's right. There's
that's the opening.
Scary Movie 2. Yeah, parodies the hell out of this movie. It's probably the best part is that opening parody, if I recall.
Yeah, it's that, and then Max von Sydow's parody character is like having diarrhea while being covered in flies in the bathroom while he's like prepping before The Exorcist.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But all right, we need to move on because we got 3 movies to talk about.
Heretic.
So it's not The Exorcist 2. It's just Exorcist 2, The Heretic.
Dun dun dun.
And it is directed by John Boorman. John Boorman.
Lost all respect.
John Boorman. I looked him up, and he had surprisingly done some things that I had heard of, and I imagine he would have had to, in order to get this movie. You figure that the sequel to The Exorcist, this is going to be big shits. You know what I mean? So he is known for the film Deliverance in 1972, which was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director. He also did the sci-fi movie Zardoz with Sean Connery, which I know for the most ridiculous. Sean Connery is in a very ridiculous outfit, and I have always wanted to see it, but I have not. He did the Excalibur movie in the early '80s that Mom, I remember, used to watch. I remember it's weird as shit. It's like very weird and abstract at times. And then he's done some other movies that have been apparently Hope and Glory in 1987. He was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director. But unfortunately, Exorcist
None of that matters.
Yeah, Exorcist 2: The Heretic is not one of his best things. In fact, it is a bad thing. It is a very bad thing. Honestly, though, as much as I remember, because I think the first time I saw this, it was on I think it was on the Family Channel or something like that, where they were playing horror movies in a marathon, and they played this, and it was edited, of course, and it was with commercials, and I remember it feeling like it was an eternity, because when you watch a movie on TV, it's like 3 hours,
Yeah.
So I remember being an eternity, and I remember it's having a premise that made sense at first, and then it just got to a point where you just it was crazy madness, and you don't really understand what's happening, and then just the movie kind of finds a way to end, and it does, and that is kind of still true. But I will say that the first half of it, or until we get to the batshit crazy sequences of we are the perspective of a locust flying around all these areas in Africa.
Brushed wings.
Yeah, the brushed wings. All that's, once we get to that point, the movie's off its fucking rocker. But before that, it is pretty easy to follow. And is, ridiculous. but like silly, like some of the premises, especially now what we know about science and hypnotism and shit. Like none of that science crap they're talking about is real. Like all the link mind linking and all that, none of it's real. That's all sci-fi gobbledygook. And so that is silly and ridiculous. And how like there are moments like that scene that you're just like scratching your head, you're like, what the fuck is this? What is going on here?
Yeah.
But did you still understand the basic plot? You still understand that like this demon's got a name. It's Pazuzu. He's still in Reagan a little bit, and also in other has hopped on to other people and whatever. And this priest, he tried to exorcise, a Latina woman, and she burst into flames, and he failed, and he's grappling with his faith and whatever. Like, I get it, and he's kind of falling down this hole, and he eventually gets like tempted by the demon. He thinks he's trying to hunt the demon, but he's actually low key like seeking the demon out for his own whatever pleasures. It's very Lovecraftian. It reminds me of like a class, like any kind of Lovecraft, like Amnesia, like Lovecraft video game or something, like an influence. Like it's like this descent into madness. Like you're studying things, and the more that you find out about it, like the crazier you get, and you think that you're still like trying to fight against this thing for good, and you're actually like helping release it and killing, and like you're gonna unleash evil on the world. It's like a classic kind of setup. But once you get to the madness, it is unwatchable.
Yeah, this movie's, I'm just gonna straight up say it, is a hot flaming pile of dog shit. I find nothing redeemable about it. And to put it in perspective, Kylie and I, we watched Halloween Ends this week as our big, celebratory thing because we watched the first two together.
Well, they said
it's just as bad as that.
See, Red Letter Media said the new Halloween movie is good.
No, they are blasphemous. They are. Look at any other review online. It's the worst fucking movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I watched the Red Letter Media review of it, and they're doing the thing of like they're giving it more credit than was actually there. I think because it's one of the worst things I've ever fucking seen. It's terrible. There's nothing makes sense. Anyways, this is on that level though. This is right where this is where it lost me. The fucking priest, who I don't even remember his name because I couldn't keep up, but
Lamont.
the priest is that's it. Father Lamont. He's with Nurse Ratched. Shout out alum.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad we just watched that.
Yeah, but okay, so they're doing their first hypnotism sequence with Reagan McNeil, and the father's just watching Nurse Ratched and Reagan do this shit, and then Nurse Ratched like gets stuck inside Max von Sydow's character mid heart attack, and instead like. And so you have this, and no one knows what to do. And you've got the father who's never seen this equipment before, never did anything. Goes, I'm gonna go in there and go after her and get her. Puts on the fucking
that's the
shit,
ridiculous
and then
shit.
immediately knows. Immediately goes in and gets her, whatever. And it right there lost me. That was, and then it goes into all this ESP bullshit, and it goes into the being able to like. Fucking brain travel, like dream travel across the world through Reagan's brain, through Pazuzu and all this shit. It very much felt like it was ripping off elements from the one Nightmare on Elm Street where they have that, where there's like the dream fucking warrior type
this
shit.
Is before that, though.
Interesting. But it is it just gets so dumb, and then at one point they just say that James Earl Jones' character Kokumo on repeat for a solid 5 minutes straight. That's the only word said. And then it has that whole thing where it's like, oh, this is super. It's super cool. They found James Earl Jones in the hut and everything. It's like, oh, we're gonna see some like real cool like witch doctor shit. And then bam, it was all a fake out. He's a regular guy, regular doctor, which I did kind of like.
I think that
first, but
racially, like as far as like not enforcing like weird tribal stereotypes, I think that it was it was like good that it didn't just lean into that. But yeah, I didn't understand what if James Earl Jones was good or not, and I know that he was, but like I was very like he's wearing a Pazuzu hat, and like I don't understand. Is the locust bad? And like, and then he's like trying to listen to his advice, and
all
it's
of
like
his advice is fucking like what is that? It's like vague, kind of convoluted, and just kind of like it's like, oh, my mother tells me I was possessed by Pazuzu, but I don't know. I don't really believe in that. These are my locusts, and then he would just say like very specific yet vague things about like the whole situation to the father, but it just felt like kind of intentionally dancing around what needed to be done.
I
to
didn't
make
know.
it feel
Yeah, I didn't know how I was supposed to
headier.
feel about any of that, and I was like expecting this big reveal or something, and I didn't. I didn't really get anything, and then it kind of descends. Because then after that he goes home, and that's when he gets Reagan, and then they're gonna like, and then they go back to the old house, and then
Yeah, and and Lamont's possessed by Pazuzu at this point as well, I guess.
yeah,
Because
I don't understand if
he's like on the
what.
train and he's like snapping at people and he's like all focused on one thing and it's like made to from what I
Yeah, he's
understand and
in
I
a
read about it,
trance. He's in the thrall of the thrall of Pazuzu at the very least.
Pazuzu, if you ask me. Uh, It's the whole thing it just feels so like the only thing this movie has going for it is those montage like dreamlike sequences. I think are kind of cool visually, but
Yeah,
they just don't
yeah,
make sense.
but then
None of it makes
the
sense.
sound design is like a cacophony of noise.
Yeah, which I didn't even mind that. If I found it added to the vibe.
Yeah, it did until it like was these long stretches of long sequences of like abstract images, and then like the locusts flying around, and like, and then when we do have scenes, it's like Father Lamont being drunkenly dragged around a town, and like we see some titties, and then like we go over here, and we see he goes to like this Christian thing, and like they kick him out, and I don't know, like it's just gets to be like he's on this adventure, and I'm not really sure what he's trying to do, like what his goals are. And then I guess it's to find Kakumo, and then he finally does, and it's kind of anticlimactic, and you're just all right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going home. We're going back to where it all began, and we're gonna punch this demon out of her. And
Fucking yeah, the dumbest thing about his trip to Africa though was when he gets to that church where they have to like climb up all the walls and everything, like all up all the cliffs and everything, and he gets there and they're like, yeah, there was a legend or whatever about this guy fell during the big storm and no one's body was never found, and the priest was just like, no, you're all idiots. He fell there. He fed off that thing. And then takes everybody down there to see it because he had the vision or whatever. But the way he does it, he's just talking to everyone like they're fucking stupid. As if like how didn't you think that he could have fell 5 feet to the right instead of where you thought he was? And bam, he's there.
that's
It was
stupid.
just it was so dumb. And it was just like that it just felt like that, like
I don't even
white dude
understand
shows
this.
up and knows all the answers.
Yeah, like I don't even know what was the significance of that. Like
It was to make him seem like a witch doctor Satanist to the priest there, I'm guessing. But that whole thing was dumb because he's not even like that's the thing. Instead of just being like, "Hey, I am a priest. My brother in Christ. We got this girl possessed XYZ. Trying to give him the lowdown, and instead he just keeps like shouting about how he saw this in the vision. He rode the wings of Pazuzu here, and it's like, of course they're gonna think you're like on the bad team. Like, why would you say
the
it
wings
that way?
of Pazuzu here?
Yeah, it's
dumb. Yeah, I don't understand it. I don't
oh
understand
man.
it.
And like I don't know, it's just it's things like that are the whole movie. But once he gets back and it becomes the whole Reagan has ESP shit and she can heal this mute child and he needs to make sure she uses her powers for good because she's the good locust. And I was like, I don't know what any of this shit means anymore. It sounded like you had like a nice like kind of analogy working and then just kind of went way too in on it. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Uh-huh. It gets really big. It gets really big, and it kind of doesn't. It doesn't work. Like the first movie is not. It's grand because of like the Babylonian shit, but like at the end of the day, it's a movie that happens in Maryland or whatever, Washington D.C. or whatever the fuck they are. Like it's at this house, and that's it. Like it's a small movie, really, but it has it uses things to make the scope feel bigger than it is and mysterious. Whereas this tries to really explore that lore and that scope and like live in that and like make that be the movie. And that's like the it's a far less interesting thing. Like this movie does show a lot. Like I think people have criticized it. Like it tells a lot and doesn't show. Like there's a lot of exposition, and I guess there is with all the Pazuzu shit. But also they try to show you and spend all this time just looking at shit without dialogue. And it kind of doesn't really make up for that. And it's like when smaller movies that have bigger ideas behind them are much more interesting because your imagination can kind of work. Whereas a movie that kind of just like lives in the lore and just like fan service and tries to fill in all the holes and give you all the answers to everything ultimately just feels like less satisfying. And like, this movie has tons of problems beyond that, but I think that's why it fails in a way that even the third movie, I think, is much better about. It's a smaller story that has bigger kind of implications, whereas this is a giant story. I keep saying the same thing. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I mean, how you know all you need to know about this movie is I was reading on the Wikipedia, and one of the producers said, "Well, after the success of the first one, we all immediately thought, let's do a cheap sequel to cash in on it." And the guy even says he's quoted as saying like. It's like, you know, we knew what it was. There's like there's no shame in it or whatever. And but I find that hilarious though because this movie has a $2 million budget.
I was gonna say this movie is not cheap. Yeah, this movie is way bigger and it's way more expensive looking.
Apparently, what happened is due to all the discrepancies, like the disagreements between the director, the studio, and everybody, it ended up ballooning in and doubling its budget. So it was originally supposed to be $7 million. But the wild thing I read was that all of the locusts are real locusts, and they brought in 25,000 in from Europe because the locusts were dying at a rate of 1 to 200 per day. And they just couldn't keep them alive long enough, and so much of the money went to just locusts. Dumb, so much dumb things. Like,
I did. Here's a factoid about this movie. Apparently, that it was released for a week, for the opening week, and then after a week, the director pulled it to re-edit it, and then they re-released it.
Oh wow.
Because it was received so poorly.
Yeah, I watched a thing earlier this week about it that was like that was saying that the opening screening in New York, like the premiere, had people in the audience laughing, like industry people just outright laughing during the movie because it was so stupid. And you gotta love it. You gotta love it.
This movie's a lot hornier, also than the first movie.
Oh yeah, the uncomfortable sexual tension between the 16-year-old girl and
I guess the first movie is horny too because not Reagan,
like this.
But then the first movie is not horny. It's like it uses sex through this little girl, and that makes you uncomfortable because it's so fucking wrong. This is the most vile ass shit to like make this little girl do this.
It's like Christmas, the Critter Christmas, blood orgy. Like that's Satan's thing. Versus sequel.
but you're getting away from my point of that. It's like a child doing these horrible things. It's like really unnerving. But like this movie just kind of uses her as like Father Lamont's jailbait. And it feels much more like perverse. It feels like not in a good way, not in an interesting way, in like a tacky way. And then all we get in the end is he kind of like they just walk away in the dark together. That's how the movie ends. like Sharon, her caretaker, dies, blows herself up because she somehow gets possessed.
Oh my god, so stupid! Out of nowhere, she's just like, "All right, we're gonna go get Reagan," and then she gets out of the car wreck, and then just lights herself on fire. And like,
yeah, there was like one line
explanation
earlier that she was like something was weird with her because she called Reagan. She's like, that little bitch. And I was like, well, maybe she's just mad, you know, maybe she's just getting frustrated with Reagan. And then once they get there, she, you know, blows them all up, blows up the house or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they walk, and then Father Lamont and Reagan hold hands walking into the darkness.
Yeah, well, Nurse Ratched is left to talk to the police.
Yeah.
That was that all's dumb. The other thing that I thought was ridiculous was back onto the jailbait thing was like they have Reagan in like a succubus form at the old house, and Father Lamont just jumps right on her and just starts like going at it on her, and I was just like, this is fucking stupid.
But then he's like beating the shit out of her. Like he's not like he's trying to fuck her. He just starts fighting her.
At first he jumps on her as if he's going to, and then he has like that like inner struggle, change of heart or whatever thing, and then he just starts literally beating the shit out of her chest until he rips her heart out. It's just the whole sequence, that whole the whole movie is just, it just doesn't make sense. It's just so all over the place with what it wants to do and be. It's just like there's no, I don't know. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. Comically ridiculous.
So apparently the actor who plays Father Lamont, I think his name is Richard Burton, he was a long time husband of Elizabeth Taylor. I'm sure you've heard of Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor. Why does that sound so familiar?
She's like one of the she's like one of the super famous people of old Hollywood. You know, like an Audrey Hepburn or
I was gonna say Audrey Hepburn. Like,
yeah, she's one of those kind of people. But anyways, he was a big alcoholic. Apparently, he like drank himself to death. Like he had huge, super bad health problems all through his 50s, which this was filmed in. I guess one of the movies he did shortly after this, he like never remembers even filming, and they had to like shoot scenes with him sitting because he couldn't stand, and just because he was so drunk every day, just constantly hammered.
That's crazy that back then they just, as long as you look the part and could say like just say some lines, they would just fucking shove you out there and make you do it instead of firing you.
Yeah, well, like I guess if you're like the name, kind of like the star power to get some butts in the seats, or maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it's not that he's bad or anything. It's just it's a flat character, and his performance is very like I don't know. It's like understated. He says things kind of monotone and he just looks bewildered all the time. He's like confused. But then except for when he's jumping in people's brains, he seems to know exactly what to do. Is there anything go ahead.
He's no George C. Scott.
You're gonna be surprised on my George C. Scott takes here, because we're gonna get to that. So is there anything that you want to touch on Exorcist 2 before we move on here?
Man, just like the third movie, forget it doesn't exist and move on.
Oh man, you're blaspheming. You're blaspheming right now.
There's nothing. I mean, there's some cool visual stuff. Like
not the second one. The second one sucks. The second one sucks.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Move on from the second one, like the third movie did, just to forget it exists.
Oh, I didn't get what you said. Yes, that makes sense. Okay. You are not blaspheming. I'm blaspheming. So yeah, well, there's a lot of people that think this is one of the worst movies ever made. I don't think that. I feel like I've seen worse things. I think it's not good though. I think I looked at Letterboxd and I had it at like a half point. I don't think it's a half. I think it's not a 0. It's not a 0.5. I feel like I could see what those are. So I think I'm ultimately going to land on a 1. It's a
5, baby.
I'm debating on a 1 or 1.5. What are you gonna give it?
I was sitting at a 1. It's up there
I'm
with
gonna
like
get
parody bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1. No, I'm gonna give it a 1.5. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1.5. Just because so there's a little difference, because I think I did find there's some interesting like things in there. Oh my god, I wanted to real quick talk about how all the Africa scenes were on this really bad set. Like,
oh yeah,
oh my god, it looked like from a 60s sci-fi movie. Like just a really bad set. And it made it look really cheap and claustrophobic and not good. But all right, moving on to we're gonna travel in time to the year of our Lord 1990 for The Exorcist 3 Legion.
Never stop exercising.
And the thing about Exorcist 3 Legion is it's the full title is just William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist 3. And it is written, the screenplay is adapted by and directed by the actual author of the Exorcist novel series. And he wrote the original movie. I don't know if he wrote the second one or not. But
no one had anything to do with the second movie from the original, other than Linda Blair.
And Max von Sydow.
And Max von Sydow.
But yes, so he did that. He did this thing. And The Exorcist 3, and the subtitle for the book is Exorcist 3 Legion. That's where I got that. The Exorcist 3 is kind of interesting. It definitely feels like a movie directed by an author, like a writer. Like, you can kind of feel that. It almost feels like TV movie a little bit. Not quite. It's definitely a step above a TV movie, like in quality and like directing and editing, but it has a little bit of that feel. Like the special effects are way beyond a TV movie. But do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I know what you mean. And I feel like it's kind of in the in some of the lighting and the editing, the way that's paced. It kind of feels like that. You have a lot of voiceover, soft spoken stuff while like a long shot happens or something that kind of like budget saving technique kind of things, but I feel like that comes more out of like you said, him being a writer, like a book writer, an author, where you're used to having that inner monologue running through your characters at all times, for book purposes. But
so after mentioning that, I feel like we should immediately get into the cast. We have George C. Scott, who is a classic Hollywood actor. I feel like he's most famous for playing Patton, General Patton. I don't know if I know neither of us have seen that movie, but it has the classic like big ass American flag and the generals like walking, giving a big speech on a stage. You know what I'm talking about?
That's from Dr. Strangelove?
Well, no, it's not from Dr. Strangelove. It's from Patton, but he's also in Dr. Strangelove. That's what I was gonna get to next.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've never really. I know this guy. I've seen his face, and I am glancing through the filmography, and I don't know what I've seen him in. Like what I personally remember.
If you Google Patton the movie, you will see the iconic shot of him in front of the American flag. 1970. I have it on the screen for the video cast. But yeah, he's also. But while you're doing that, he was also in one of my favorite films, Doctor Strangelove. He plays General Turgid. And he is a fucking nut, and I love it. He's one of my favorite characters in the movie. Apparently, he was not a comedy actor, and he was told to play ridiculous, like over the top, and for fun. And Stanley Kubrick took all of those takes when he was acting silly. So he considers himself more of a serious actor, and I can see why, because my man's is trying to act his ass off in this film. And I don't know if it's always successful, but I will say that I can like really tell that he's putting like his all into some of this shit. Like the monologue at the end, and like I love the dialogue between him and the father where they're like quipping at each other. It's like real fast and it's clever. Everyone's got a clever response to the other one. Like the writing is really good there. I don't know. Obviously, you got to get something off your chest about George C. Scott. So let's let it rip.
Now, I haven't seen him any other movies he's been in, but
you never saw Doctor Strangelove.
I've seen parts of it, but I've never seen it in its entirety.
Oh, we're gonna have to do it for the cast.
What I was gonna say, this man has two acting abilities, two switches that he can do for his acting in this, which is soft and somber, very ASMR like, and outright screaming at the top of his lungs, unannounced mid-sentence, and it just kind of feels out of nowhere, like a very, it reminds me of very Nicolas Cage.
Oh my God, I love. There's a very cagey scene in particular where I think it's the mayor, or not the mayor. It's like, they're in the hospital, and I think it's the president of the hospital, the guy who runs the whole thing. And he's like bitching at the detectives, like, "Well, you guys gotta get out of here." And George C. Scott's trying to do his job and tell his partner what to do, and all of a sudden he just freaks the fuck out. He's like, "Will you shut the fuck up?" And then he just starts crying. He goes from screaming to crying. Just crying, and then he like calms himself down. And he like starts to tell him, what's up. And everyone can see holy fuck, this guy is so emotional. I mean, his best friend got murdered. Obviously, they took the time to show us that, him and this priest are best friends. And he's really fucking torn up about the murder. He hates his job. Or not that he hates his job, but like he has these really bad, like weird moments and friction with his coworkers and
well, it's the restart of the Gemini killer killings. So he's like, by the time the father dies, that's the third death. So he's like already like at his wit's end because there's no leads on the murderer or anything. It's reminiscing of a murder pattern that has details that they never release to the public, and his best friend dies. But it's so like in that scene, I'll give him that it works well. But earlier, before the father dies, when he's like just gets to the hospital and he's talking to the father or whatever, and he's talking to that one nurse, and he's just like asking her basic questions, and she's just like kind of not really giving him answers. And then he's just out of nowhere, he's like, "Well, did they sign in for whatever?" And she's like, "Nope." And he's just like, "Well, did you check?" And just screams at the top of his lungs. And there's so many moments in this movie where he's just talking normally and then switches to just insane screaming out of nowhere. And I can't tell if I laugh at it most of the time. Because it just seems so out of nowhere sometimes. Like I do like it. It gives the movie some style, I guess. Something I can't think of the word to describe it. But then you'll just cut to him reading the Bible in his house, and it's just very somber, just like reading the rite of the exorcism, about like the Legion line, and or like he's doing his in-head monologues. It's nice and soft or whatever, and then he's just immediately back to screaming. Like all the stuff with the Father Karras' character in the I guess it's not solitary confinement, but it's wherever they have the bad guy.
They're in an insane asylum, I think.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, he's a wild actor in this. He's completely he's Nick Cage in it.
With it. I fucked with it, honestly. I fucked with it, and honestly, you know who else is Nick Cage in it?
Who?
Our boy, other friend of the show. Classic Brad Dourif was caging his ass off.
Oh my God! At one point it felt like a 10-minute just like monologue he went on in the cell.
Oh, we're just dripping every word out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Like it's just like you're zooming in on his mouth, and he's speaking slowly, and they're adjusting the pitch up and down, constantly. And it's really fucking with you. So. Brad Dourif kicks ass. George C. Scott, I think, kicks ass. Debatably kicks ass. But I think the one thing that's kind of confusing about this movie is I didn't understand who was Jason Miller and who was Brad Dourif was the original Gemini killer, is what I've gathered. And that Jason, so they tell you this only through exposition, that Jason Miller's character at the Father Karras at the end of the original movie did die, but that when his spirit left his body, that the demon Pazuzu, I guess, put in the spirit of a serial killer, the Gemini killer. And then it took however 15 years to regenerate his cells in brain cells or whatever to be able to function again. But he's still locked up because they figured it out and they locked him up because he's crazy. So
well, they said that there's a random throwaway line that they say where they found a corpse looking man on the street who was catatonic, so they brought him in, and that's the throwaway line.
Okay, yeah, that's what it is. So we see Brad Dourif for most of the movie, but there are the moments where we see Jason Miller as Father Karras, who's 15 years older. He looks like age hit him fucking hard. As a human being, and like that, and it's kind of confusing. And then also we are introduced to this character, this doctor character played by Scott Wilson, who is most well known in my mind as playing Herschel on The Walking Dead. He's much older though in that role. He's like this doctor that's really into the occult and is like apparently was connected to all the stuff somehow. I kind of was confused on that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Talking about Father Morning?
No, not Father Morning. There's like a brown-haired doctor played by Scott.
Oh, yeah. He's just dead, and they cut back to him. And
yeah,
he OD'd.
He OD'd. Yeah, I don't know if he killed himself or he OD'd, but yeah.
Yeah, they hinted. So I took it as he killed himself, but it's because it made it seem like, based on the conversations between Brad Dourif and Nick Cage, that he felt bad about like kind of having a hand in helping the dude like do his murders and shit, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. But it wasn't done. Nothing's explicit. It's just kind of like. And there's so much exposition that happens in those conversations, and with all the pitch changes and everything, I got so lost. I'm not even gonna lie. In trying to understand what the fuck was going on. Like,
yeah, I think
after the movie, I had to have it explained to me via text. What was actually happening?
Yeah, they well, I thought that the doctor, like, they wanted George C. Scott to talk to the doctor about it because they knew that he'd be open to the fact that the Gemini killer would be back because he's into this like supernatural shit or whatever. I don't know. Like, that's the one thing that I would want to go back and try to understand. But yeah, that's kind of a thing. And but yeah, we get these killings, and we're not sure how they're happening because the Jason Miller Gemini killer is locked away and he's not able to escape. And George C. Scott mentioned something about like, oh, maybe somebody lets him out and he comes back in, when he's done. And then we get it revealed eventually that he's like able to possess catatonics. He says the catatonics, people that are have mental disabilities like that are easy to manipulate. The coolest part in this whole, other than George C. Scott and Brad Dourif kicking ass, the coolest part of this movie is the one death. The nurse that gets killed in the hospital. So there's
the big jump scare.
Yes. Oh my God. There's this long scene of this nurse like going through the rooms, and she accidentally walks in on a doctor, and he's pissed, and she's going into the other rooms and doing her job, and it kind of just this like wide shot, and it sits on it for a little while, and then at the very end of the shot, you just see this white robed person coming out with these big ass medical shears and like coming to just chop her head off or whatever. And it is a jump scare, and it's just like a guy in a robe, nothing crazy. But for some reason, it's just like so effective, like in a classic way. Like, I don't know, like very simple but very effective of a good jump scare. Like I really, really like that. Like if I was to tell somebody, this is the way to do a jump scare, this is the way to do it. Don't fill your movie with a shitload of them. Just have one really fucking cool one.
That makes sense. I loved this scene mostly because it is an ASMR wet dream, and so I was super sucked into it. I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to rewatch the scene with headphones on because it's so nice. It's so silent, and all you hear is just the little steps and the papers shuffling, the doors, and all that. And then out of nowhere, just fucking
that's how they
just
get
wrecked
you.
Me.
Yep, that's how they set you up.
I was so zen. Because that's what most of this movie is like silent with just diegetic sound of just like the sounds of the world and nothing really else, and then soft spoken stuff happening. And it can be very relaxing at times. At least I found watching it, where it almost feels like you're just kind of like watching a stage play, because there's only ever a handful of people in a scene at once, and it's mainly dialogue heavy. But having the things like that really did spice it up. Give it more of like that movie kind of flair to it.
So apparently, there was. So originally there was supposed to be no exorcism in the movie. That it was just going to end with George C. Scott, coming back to the hospital and shooting Jason Miller in the face, and that's it. There's going to be no like exorcist scene. So apparently the studio told them to, once the movie was done, like, you need to have an exorcist movie in this, Exorcist in The Exorcist 3. So they did reshoots, and they added on the like Father, what's his name? Father Morning, whatever.
Father Morning.
So they have these like small scenes that are sprinkled throughout the film that are very short of this priest that's just doing his own thing. And it has like no real connection to the movie. And then at the end, he just randomly shows up and to, tries to perform an exorcism on Jason Miller.
That whole sequence is pretty fucking cool, to be honest. Like, because he just kind of shows up, like, and it's dumb that he just kind of, he's barely in the movie and he just shows up. He's like, all right, I'm here to fuck shit up. I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. But he gets his ass whooped. But the whole sequence is really cool though, and it's like there's no special effects really. Like I think there are, but not really anything to note up until this point in the movie. And then it's just like, all right, they pour the budget into this final sequence. But it was cool though. It does feel forced because it doesn't really, the whole movie doesn't really play on religion in that way as much as it's more about like the evil of people rather than like a battle between the church and evil.
Yeah.
Or just like, or God and evil, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just people and evil, definitely.
And so like it works, but it doesn't. I don't know. Like I feel like without something like that, the movie would have felt more boring. I think it needed some kind of like big climax to have.
I think it did make it better. I mean, the original climax was him going to back home to save his granddaughter or save his daughter or whatever from being killed.
And
from
like,
the
but
lady.
that on yeah, and that wasn't really even that big of a deal. Like,
but I could see that working, but I don't think it's as good as, even though it does feel tacked on, I think it added to the film. It didn't take away.
Did you like whenever the priest gets stuck in the ceiling and then he has to like rip all of his flesh off of the ceiling to get down?
Yeah,
I thought that was cool. I really enjoyed that.
We see, so there's like no gore or anything like that in the rest of the movie. It's only in that ending Exorcist where the guy gets his skin ripped off and all that.
Yeah, the lightning bolts are like
breaking
up the ground.
all the budget is on the exorcism.
Do you know what the crucified body that said Police Boys Club meant? Like, I don't know what that shirt had to do with.
So they're talking about this little boy that was murdered, in the beginning. That was like the
Yeah.
whole way the movie started. He was in this like children's police club, and like George C. Scott like knew the kid who was murdered. And so when George C. Scott has that vision where he's in heaven and he sees like the dead priest before he dies, he also sees that little boy. That's why the Jesus was painted in blackface, like a minstrel show.
Yeah,
Because he
yeah,
was
yeah.
like the boy.
Okay. Yeah, I
Because
just
the
the
boy is
shirt,
black.
the police boys club shirt is what threw me off specifically. Cuz I
Yeah,
didn't know if what that was in reference to. But the
that was the
yeah,
one
that whole
shirt the
scene.
boy was wearing.
Gotcha. Um but yeah, I thought that shit was cool though when all those naked bodies and the cross came up out, and it was because that point I was just like, where the fuck are they going with this? Like, is it we about to see hell? Is someone getting pulled down, or is this gonna stay small like in the room? And I think it works best that it just stays small because this
It
isn't this is a
still it was big for the movie, I guess.
yeah, it's big for the movie, but not big like it doesn't go deep into lore or anything like that. Like this still
Yeah.
remains just like a character drama between it's kind of like Seven, you know what I mean?
That's
I wouldn't be
very interesting
surprised.
that you said that because the Red Letter Media movies thought that this might have been like an influence on Seven because it's
I totally see that.
a good few years before it.
I totally see that, especially because I think because wasn't Seven based on like loosely based on the Zodiac killer? Um,
Yeah.
because I was reading that this movie, the writer director guy, Blatty,
Yeah, the
also based a lot of this.
Gemini Killer is Zodiac. Yeah.
Yeah. It's they just took a lot of points out of that as like the base for the movie. So that I mean, it could just be in that we see that similarities, but it definitely feels it, especially because it's like a well, I guess this is more of a one man detective team, whereas that one's two, but it almost feels two man priest in the beginning, but he's barely in it when he
Yeah,
dies.
I thought he was gonna be in it more. But I guess that's kind of how they get you. But all right, I don't really have anything else to say about this movie. It's like I think I never seen it before, and I think after Exorcist 2, I just assumed that this was like a cash grab, straight to DVD sequel kind of thing. And even from like the cover art and everything, and now that I've seen it, it's actually a very interesting and like I would say it's a movie that should be watched. I'm not, my score might not reflect it as like the best movie ever, but I think that it is a very good horror movie, especially like there's so many lower budget horror movies that people like, and I think this is right in that mix, and yeah, I like it. I think it's underrated.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I definitely feel like if you've seen the first one, you should watch this one. Skip the second unless you're feeling yourself.
Unless you want
Uh,
the Pazuzu lore.
yeah, unless you need that to be pizzuzued all over yourself. But the I guess did you score? I guess I'll do mine.
No, I'll score it. I'm gonna give it a 3.
Oh, sweet. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, I could see giving it a 3.5, maybe, but I think 3 is the best place for it because it's good. It's a good movie, and it's underrated. I think that like a lot of people like would write it off for the reasons that I just stated that I had written it off in the past. Honestly, if it wasn't for that Red Letter Media video, I probably wouldn't have watched it or like suggested to watch it, and I'm glad that I did. And yeah, so this is it.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's a solid 3 as in like you could see this as some people could see this as bad, but for the most part I think it's a good watch, and if you're into something that's more like play oriented or and that's dialogue heavy, I think this is a good nice like crime thriller rather than more of like a religious horror movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. I like it a lot. I think that it is good. But that is gonna do it for this
Yes.
episode.
Zuzu.
And
Yes.
yes, So make sure you follow us on all the things at Best Boys Film Pod. And I'm at Slob Thomas. He is at Corey with a Story with a K. I think we're going to be taking an extended break. I don't know if we were going to be starting it now, but yeah, I think we are. So the way that it's going to work, so for those that are currently, if you've been following with us, I really appreciate that. And I would hope that you will stick around in the future for whatever endeavors that we're doing. We are taking a break from the podcast temporarily. We are going to come back at least for the holidays. And I think we've been kind of we've been playing we've been barely getting these episodes out, and we want to try to take a break and stack up some ammo and kind of restructure things and do it right, and kind of recharge the batteries. So we're going to take a break for the holidays through the end of the year and try to come back in the spring for a second season and similar format, but doing things a little, spicing it up a little bit. But yeah, Corey, you have anything you want to say to the children out there?
Have a happy holidays, and we'll see you real soon.
Real soon. So thank you all for watching, listening, sticking around. We appreciate it. Keep watching those movies, and of course, if you have suggestions, make sure you hit us a dial. Y'all have a great one. Bye.
Bye.